Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Megan and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis of how it impacts your school community. Plus, we are talking today about green practices and zero emission vehicles. What you need to know about the upcoming changes with zero emission vehicles, and we'll talk to one school district about how they are implementing changes. And the ACSA legislative lunch break starts now. Couple of minutes after 1 o'clock, we welcome you on a Wednesday to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. My co-host today will be Megan Bear, ACSA's legislative advocate. We're trying to clean up her signal right now. Edgar, as you can tell, not here. He is taking a little vacation. We can give him a hard time about that when he returns. But go ahead and jump into the chat. Say hello and let us know where you're watching from today. Neri Pais, our first one on the chat today. William Redford is with us today. Jared Hungerford from Region 17. Philip Piersbacher is with us. Mark Campbell. So good to have all of you guys here with us after taking a week off. We've got a really interesting subject to talk about coming up after our news headlines. We're going to be talking about green fleets, transportation that's going to be in your school district, and zero emission vehicles, and the new standards and practices you're going to need to have in your school districts. We'll talk about that in just a couple of moments. First, we've had a very, very big news day as far as public education is concerned. So let's go ahead and bring you up to date on what is happening. This morning, CDE released data for student assessments and chronic absenteeism, among others, for the school year of 2022-2023. According to the CDE, California's rates are in line with the rest of the nation or performing better, that coming from CDE. One example, chronic absentee rate in California dropped by 5% down to 24.9%. For context, the rate was 14% pre-pandemic, so there's obviously still a lot of work to be done. One data point of note, the migrant student chronic absenteeism rate dropped 10% from 21-22. The percentage of students who met or exceeded these standards on the Smarter Balanced summative assessment for mathematics increased from 33.4% in 21-22 to 34.6% in 22-23, with the mean scale scores increasing in all grades. For the California Science Test, student scores were generally consistent with pre-pandemic levels, showing a continued improvement with a small increase from the prior year, moving from 29.5% in 21-22 to 30.2% in 22-23. In reviewing the data, Edgar, he's on vacation, but he still had the opportunity to comment on the data that's just come out. He said, quote, "The newly released assessment and chronic absenteeism data is but one example of overall progress for California students statewide. Progress and district bright spots highlight the efficacy of strategic and intentional efforts. While it's clear that there is more work to ensure sustained progress and continued repayment of the education debt or continued closures of opportunity gap, there is confidence in that school communities, staff, administrators, families, and students are collaborating towards significant student outcomes." So that based on assessment data. Let's move over to Rockland, which is just east of Sacramento. The teachers union there has filed for an unfair labor practice, mind you. And now the State Public Employee Relations Board has issued a formal complaint against Rockland Unified for their board-approved policy that forces district staff to notify parents within 3 days if their child changes their identity on school records. On September 7th, in a 4-1 vote, the Rockland School Board approved the policy. The Rockland Teachers Professional Association, according to the Sacramento Bee, says this is in violation of the Educational Employment Relations Act regarding these parental notification policies. As you know, State Attorney General Rob Bonta has already sued one school district for voting to implement a similar policy, and according to the Bee, has threatened legal action against Rockland Unified and another district in Placer County for passing a similar policy. And let's go ahead and switch over and talk about SB 494. We've been telling you about Senate Bill 494 for some time. This is the ACSA-sponsored bill requiring school boards to provide a more than 24-hour notice if they intend to dismiss a California public school district leader. The bill was officially signed by the governor, receiving bipartisan support from the legislature, and it now requires 72 hours notice before a public hearing, so also known as the regular meeting under the Brown Act, to terminate a district superintendent and or assistant superintendent without cause. School boards may not take action to terminate a superintendent or assistant superintendent without cause within 30 days following the first convening of a school board following an election that results in a change in board membership. The bill goes into effect January 1 of 2024. So a little bit of news for you here as we move through on our Wednesday. I want to say hello. Grant Bennett is with us today from Paris Unified. Paris down in Southern California. Maria Thompson with us today. Deanna Coulian is with us today. And let me see who else is with us today. Morgan Nugent. I see a bunch of you with us today. So thank you so much for being with us. Very happy to have you with us today. I'm going to ask my crew in the back. I'm seeing people walk behind Megan. So clearly Megan may not be ready to go yet, but let's go ahead and let's switch our topics. We'll let Megan jump in here afterwards, and we'll give her a hard time for the type of technology she's got working inside of her office. We are going to talk today about green practices and zero emission fleets. As many of you know, we are going to start needing to transition over to these zero emissions vehicles, zero emission fleets in our school districts. What we wanted to do, Megan, good to see you.
Hi.
What we wanted to do today was talk about this particular issue, talk to one school district about how they're implementing some of these practices now as school districts statewide prepare to move forward with some of these practices as well. Janet Schulze is superintendent from Pittsburgh Unified School District, and Matt Belasco is the director of maintenance and operations from Pittsburgh Unified School District. Janet and Matt, it is an honor to have you guys here on the ACSA legislative lunch break as we handle technical issues. We'll just move ourselves over to transportation issues. Good to have you guys. Jenna, let me ask you, your district is committed to these green practices, lowering emissions, focusing on the green energy. How did the formulation of the district's priorities help you in getting started with these vehicle fleet projects?
Thank you, and thanks for having us. It was a huge help. It's part of our board goals, and so we actually have a board policy around supporting green practices, where possible. And it's something that we do throughout the district, whether it's teaching recycling to the kids, using solar, anywhere that we can really incorporate green practices. So we started a number of years ago purchasing electric vehicles, both for buses and for our small fleet as well, too, and phasing them in as we could and building up that infrastructure with chargers.
Well, we're still working on technical issues. Megan, how are your technical issues back there? You ready to go?
Well, I'm in Michael Kelly's office. As you can see, his beautiful family behind me.
Yes.
So my computer has failed me. Thank you, everyone, I'm sure you've all been there.
Matt, let me ask you this question. As transportation director, you've overseen the fleet transition to low or the zero emission vehicles. Can you tell us about how you got started and how the district was able to fund this transition?
Sure, and start off by saying thanks again for having us. We're really honored to be able to help support and talk other folks through these challenges, because they are definitely have some challenges. We actually started way back in 2018 when we got our first 2 electric school buses on the ground. We funded those with a combination of district funds and the HFIT program, which is the hybrid and zero emission truck and bus voucher that's funded by the California Air Resource Board. So, getting that transition started very early was a good opportunity for us to take advantage of other funding opportunities that were happening as the E transition was really early, but PG&E and other utilities were getting involved in that, and in anticipation of down the line what's coming is what essentially what we're dealing with now, being ready for that. So we were a good fit for a pilot program that helped fund about $1.5 million of infrastructure. We'll talk more about infrastructure a little later, but so we have got our first 2 buses on the ground in 2018 and 2 additional buses in January of 2020. We since have ordered 3 additional buses. One of the challenges that the industry is faced with as AB 579 really starts to take shape is that all of us will be ordering school buses throughout the entire state of California. So we're going to see the supply chain continue to be challenged in terms of trying to replace 10,000 highly polluting buses, throughout California all at one time. So that can be some of the challenges that we're looking at, we're going to be faced with. But again, I think starting early was a great opportunity for us to kind of get ahead of the curve, to work out a lot of the details that we will, and are definitely proud to share with other school districts throughout California to help them maybe miss some of the potholes or some of the other challenges that we have.
So Janet, a lot of our superintendents are really concerned with this big push, multiple policies pushing towards 2045, these clean bus and truck fleets. What do you think about this goal of 2045, and what are your thoughts?
I think the goal for green practices is great. I think it's a great goal to be, and I think California has been on the forefront of that, which is great, in doing more green practices. I think that as it pertains to school districts, it's not fair or realistic to think that school districts are going to be able to meet this goal without there being a lot more support from the state and other agencies in terms of the infrastructure, the charging stations, the availability of the buses. Those are all things that we don't control, and really shouldn't be. Right. So again, I really believe in the green practices. I'm a big fan of that. We've been working on it in our district for years. We have that commitment. Even with having everything in place that we have, we would not be able to afford that infrastructure if it was not for us being one of the early grant recipients from PG&E. And we've just sort of built on that and secured other grants and done some other energy charging stations, at our schools, things like that. But we would not have been able to do that with our funds just the school district funds as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is absolutely philosophically, I think that's great. And I think there's going to have to be more structures and supports in order for school districts to achieve this goal.
Folks, want to remind you, if you have any questions for Janet or Matt, go ahead and put those into the chat. We'll try and tackle some of those a little bit later on. Matt, who's got the busiest office that you can possibly have. This is proof that in transportation, your day does not have a dip in communications. Am I correct, Matt?
100%. I'm sorry about the background radio, right? We had a bit of an earthquake earlier, so we're dealing with some of those fun challenges from staff. So
Janet, we can't argue if Matt has a busy day or not, because we just heard all of the chatter. Matt, let me ask you about zero emission vehicles. They require significant infrastructure upgrades, in addition to what you had just mentioned about, everybody's going to have to start ordering these types of vehicles. Can you tell us a little bit about what Pittsburgh Unified has done to make charging fleets possible? What was the process like? What were some of the biggest challenges?
So again, back when we got the first buses, that was a learning process for us as well. So we kind of had the proverbial cart before the horse. We had the buses on the ground first, and then we were trying to figure out, okay, now we've got these buses. How are we going to charge them? So luckily, again, we were able to work with our local utility to be part of a pilot program that provided that infrastructure, upgrading the switchgear and the transformer as, the power consumption was going to be much greater. And I think one of the most important things for everyone to think about is, as we move towards this 2045 target, think about future proofing as much as you can now, where there is funding and where there is opportunities to be able to do so. 100%, I feel so fortunate to work in a district that has great support, like Janet mentioned, with the board goals and the board policies that support the transition to green practices. But again, there's definitely some challenges. Just yesterday, I was at the Green Schools Conference down in Pasadena, and one of the biggest topics was infrastructure, and then secondly, getting those buses from the manufacturer here on the grounds. And there was a large school district that said they had placed an order for 50 buses and only got 20 of them, and then have been struggling with getting a contractor out to make those improvements on the at the actual depot so that they can charge them. Nothing could be worse than to have this amazing fleet of zero emission vehicles that is going to help the environment, but they're sitting in the yard because you can't charge them. So as you move forward with that process, definitely look down the line at, not what we're going to be doing or not what your needs are today or even next couple years, but look at, down the line, what are we looking at for that 2045 target? So we were extremely fortunate to have that partnership that, that was able to pay for a lot of this. So a lot of those funds are not here anymore. So just have to be creative as possible. There's a couple websites that I'm happy to share offline, or if anyone would like to contact me, you can definitely get a hold of us, and I'm glad to share those clearinghouses where there's grants available and grants available for helping with making some of those infrastructure changes and those improvements, because they do take a long time. We all know we have the DSA regulatory agency that can take some time to work through their processes to ensure that that the buses and the charging infrastructure that we have on site is safe, is not interfering with our egress or our access for ADA. So there's definitely a lot that goes into it. So just start thinking of those things now, working with your facilities and maintenance team at what those things are going to look like a few years down the line.
Matt, can I just follow up? I think it's really interesting, the work that you all had to do with the utilities and kind of this unique partnership you had. And it also kind of speaks to some of the grid challenges that are, frankly, out of school districts' control. So would you mind just talking a little bit more about kind of that unique partnership you had with PG&E and what you all did there to make sure you could support the charging equipment?
Yeah, I think one of the amazing things about us having those wheels on the ground, right, is a utility was able to identify, okay, that's a shovel ready project, right? Putting that infrastructure there, they'll be able to gather some of that data that they can use to help organizations that are going to be making this move in the future. So just again being on the front end of that allowed us to be able to get some of those funds, to take advantage of those opportunities. So we really constructed a very good relationship, and we have a lot of communication. So, I talk back and forth to our PG&E reps, on a monthly basis to, ask, what's coming next? Is there other funding opportunities? So I think that's another great tip is, for districts to be in communication with your PG&E representative. That is really helpful in terms of, knowing what's coming, where some of those funding opportunities are, and then also having them come out and do an actual, a walk at your site, do an assessment to see what other infrastructure changes are going to be needed. Are they going to need to upgrade the transformer to be able to safely bring in more power, as you really expand that fleet? So definitely, developing a rapport, a relationship, open communication with your utility is absolutely key in moving a lot of these projects forward. Certainly was in our case, and my colleagues that I work with, same thing. That's always my recommendation. Reach out, have that rapport, have that open communication with them so that you can, try to head off any issues that you would have ahead of time, and also be really prepared when there is the opportunity to move forward, that you're in a good position to do that. You have enough power, you've got enough, you've got a plan on where that's going to come from and how that transition is going to happen.
Matt, I'm going to ask you this because Chris Mastros over in Modesto City Schools, he says, we have several electronic school buses and an electronic delivery van for our library services, which, gives me the opportunity to ask Dolores Flores' questions. Hi, what type of EV buses? Can you just tell us a little bit about the EV buses, the EV vehicles that you are using?
Sure. So we've really got a pretty expansive fleet overall. We have the buses that we have right now are a Type D or a transit bus. Think of your flat nosed 75 passenger buses. So that's what we have 4 of right now. What's on order and is scheduled to come in either at the end of this month or sometime during November is more of a Type C bus, a 30 passenger bus. So, for smaller, very specific transportation. In terms of the rest of our fleet, because we have made a pretty significant investment in our white fleet as well. So we have, delivery vehicles. We have vehicles that transport scholars back and forth to, again, for very specific needs. Our mail inter-district courier it drives an electric vehicle. We have our child nutrition team has a delivery vehicle, a van, or excuse me, not a van, but a box truck that's a zero emission. We have a zero emission riding lawnmower that we were fortunate to get through a grant of our local air district, BACMed, about 4 years ago. Again, these are, being, in communication with these groups has really helped us be open to receiving those type of opportunities and to really jump on them and take advantage of them as they come up.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Electronic lawnmower, riding mower. So for both of you, as the state is pushing really aggressively towards this goal, what do you think the state can and should do to support every school district to meet these kinds of zero emission vehicle goals?
I think the state, has to think through what it will actually take for the infrastructure and come up with a plan that's funded and that goes through. Perhaps it could be through our municipal partners, through counties. Where are we going to have charging stations? We're in a fairly urban area, but even so, we have to think about, can we use certain buses because they may not have a charging station? I imagine, where we're going for an athletic event or something of that nature. I imagine, my rural colleagues are wondering, even on their day-to-day routes, how this could work if something happens with that. So I think taking an approach where you look at the state as a whole, maybe by counties, and doing an assessment of how many charging stations are going to be needed in order to accomplish this goal. And then a whole statewide physical plan for creating that infrastructure. Because while the school districts can certainly, be responsible for purchasing the electric buses, there's no way that we could fund the infrastructure, that would be required for that. So that would be the biggest thing to make that a reality, would be my recommendation in terms of looking at it as a state, perhaps through the counties, and deciding where we actually need to have charging stations across the state to make this a reality, and then a timeline and plan for implementation, which would then drive the timeline and plan for the implementation for the districts as well.
Hey, Matt, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond to this final question here because we had two people that asked specifically about chargers. Carol asked who is the manufacturer of the chargers, and then Jessica asked, can all of those vehicles use the same charging stations as you mentioned, the Type D, Type C, and delivery vehicles? So there you go. I'm giving you 30 seconds to put it all together in that.
Well, the first part would be very easy. I'll just echo what Dr. Schultz had said. That's exactly the approach that I think would be most prudent. Take a look at that, count, area, region by region, and be able to put a plan together. In terms of the chargers, so yes, the chargers have a pretty standard delivery port that connects into the vehicles. The particular brand of chargers that we use is for our internal is Clipper Creek, and then out at our school sites is ChargePoint, and they do use a standard format that is able to to work on 90% of the vehicles. They don't work on Teslas. There is an adapter, but in terms of the vehicles that we're using most frequently, yes, there is a pretty standard format for plugging in and out of those.
All right. Janice Schultz, the superintendent, Pittsburgh Unified School District. Matt Belasco, director of maintenance and operations from Pittsburgh Unified School District. Janet and Matt, it's been great having you here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Take care. Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Lot of great information there. And if you like what you see here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to subscribe to us on YouTube or like us on Facebook. When you subscribe or like us, you'll get instant alerts when we're about to come on the air with breaking news. And then, of course, you'll hear when we're coming on for our Wednesday 1 p.m. show. Also, if you have a great story happening in your school community, we want to tell your story. We want to amplify what's happening in your school community. Go ahead and send your stories, your bullet points, your photos to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, at mcarl@axa.org. ACSA Leadership Summit, Megan, coming your way November 2nd through 4th. Megan will be signing autographs at Leadership Summit. You don't want to miss it. Here's a preview.
Come hang out.
And that is ACSA Leadership Summit, November 2nd through 4th in Sacramento. You can register axa.org/professional-learning. Now, we've got a little bit of a promotion coming on right here. You don't want to miss this. Register now for ACSA Leadership Summit, and you could win a $250 Southwest gift card. And if you refer a friend, you could win too. Promotion is valid through October 31st. Megan, I believe that is next Tuesday, if my calendar is correct. Again, register at axa.org/professional-learning. Megan, when we have Leadership Summit, this will be your third Leadership Summit here at ACSA. Am I correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So come hang out with us. We'll have all the updates. It'll be fun. We'll have a good time. So please come hang out.
Yes, come hang out. Come join the big party that's happening here in Sacramento. Megan, it's been great having you here on the show with me today. Folks, thank you so much for being with us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.